Good afternoon. Welcome to the Business Boardcast. I'm Nikki Larkin, and with me today is Tim Cawdron. So we have welcome back. Yes, hi Tim. Welcome back. For those, we had a nice long summer break, but we are back. We are having these sessions every month is going to be, so this is actually the Business Boardcast today. I see I've actually got the wrong logo on, but never mind. So yes, it's Business Boardcast today, and we are always going to be on the fourth Wednesday of every month. So today what we decided to do was we brought in a very experienced HR professional, because there's so much happening in the economy and with HR, etc. So many different things happening that we thought it was best to bring in a professional to help all those business owners out there with lots of stuff to navigate. So welcome, Tim. Welcome for your first time. Hi.
Thank you very much, Nikki, and good afternoon, everybody. Would you like me to go for it now, Nikki?
Yeah, no, let's dive in. Just for just a couple minor housekeeping things. Please do say hi in the comments, so I know that everything's working, because it's always good to know that it's all working going on into LinkedIn Live. And onto live on YouTube as well. So please do say hi so I know that's working. And please do ask questions as we go, and I will bring in the questions as we go. We're always happy to answer any question as we go live, no problem at all. If there is anything super tricky that we need to come back to you on, we will always come back to you at a later date. But yes, all over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Nikki, and thank you also for the invitation. Good afternoon again, everybody. We've got just 30 minutes, so I'm going to move at quite a pace. What I'm going to be looking at with you all is the economic outlook. That's number one, and implications for the labour market and wages. Secondly, the cost of living crisis and how some employers are addressing that. Thirdly, and finally, actually, the employment law changes, the potential shifts coming up with both Conservative and Labour Party, and other parties are available. So we'll be looking at that. Opportunity for questions at the end. So I'm hoping you can see the slides. I'm going to move quite quickly through them. It should have changed. So why am I qualified to talk about this? Well, I've been 30 odd years with large FTSE 100 organisations. There's Babcock and Amy there, and all over the place, and all sorts of different industries as well. Then the past, since 2016 anyway, in our SME world, small medium-sized enterprise, and Ability Matters are there, who do prosthetics and orthotics and wheelchairs, which was a great introduction to our world as well. Like many of you, I'm a business owner, and I was just chatting with Nikki a few minutes ago. I volunteer just half a day a week with Citizens Advice, which I find quite interesting and takes me to a different world, and I look at it for different prisms. So that's good. So the overall economic outlook, I picked up last year, quote, the last 20 years have been called a holiday from history. In other words, no serious conflicts and low inflation. Well, I think we all know now that that's changed quite a lot. So start off with the Bank of England. And there it is. You'll have perhaps noted last week the interest rates were held at 5.25% in September, which ends around 14 consecutive increases. This is down from a peak of 11.1% in October last year. And the UK has one of the highest rates in the G7. And the expectation is that interest rates will remain at 5.25% for several months. That's the current view. I get called by the Bank of England once or twice a year just to see. I'm on a sort of panel along with many other people, I'm sure, and they just check what's happening in the market. So they're quite grounded sometimes in some of the things they come up with. In terms of inflation, again, good news, inflation is falling. It's now 6.7% in the year to August this year. which was an unexpected fall, actually. The Bank of England target is 2%. Now, I don't think they'll get there anytime soon, but it's certainly the target. What they say in terms of a commentary, in terms of what I do anyway, is the shrunken workforce will lead to an increased competition for staff and thus continue to drive rapid wage growth. This could lead, I'm quoting here, hence looking down, this could keep price pressures elevated for some time. And just now there's still a near record low employment, more than 1 million job vacancies, and a wage growth of 7.2% in the job market, which they consider will remain tight for some time yet. The main employment-related points I picked up from the Bank of England presentation was there's a shallow recession than they anticipated last year in the UK, but it's still going on longer than parts of Europe. And also, some employers are doing what they call labour hoarding. In other words, hanging on to staff as long as possible. And there's a bit of a gap in the age 50 to 65-year-old workers. Many have left the economy, are leaving the workforce in significant numbers, and they consider that to be an anchor on growth. And in terms of wage settlements, they consider we've seen the peak. Again, that's good news for us, I'm sure. The median per award has dropped below 6%, and settlements this year have ranged between 5 and 8% for the year. And it is suggested that it will be 5% over 2023 as a whole. So that would be the average. And now we move to the second part, which is the cost of living crisis. And again, my mention of the citizens' advice keeps me quite tuned into that, because when I go in, there's lots of food parcels we have to organise, and the cost of living is really biting into a lot of our clients. So what have some employers done to support staff in this situation? I think we'd all know higher than normal salary increases, one-off lump sum payments, bonuses if you like. There's hardship funds, some have set up, public transport loans, debt support, salary sacrifice schemes, for which pensions in part comes into it. Income streaming, it's what effectively that is employees can draw down some of their already earned salary before the normal payday set at the end of the month or the 28th of the month. There have been an increase in pension contributions by certain employers, because that's tax effective, as many of you know, with salary sacrifice, and employee discount schemes as well. And one that I'd always advocate to any clients and people that I've dealt with in this area is an employee assistance program, EAP, and other mental health wellbeing services, which in the grand scheme of things aren't that expensive for employers, but they're really useful for employees. A few years ago, when I was working perhaps with the big blue chips, they weren't really used very much, but I think they're used a lot more now. So I think that's a good thing for staff.
Indeed, Tim. Sometimes people actually have them as parts of other packages of other things and don't even realise they're available. So if you are subscribing to some sort of HR service like Peninsula or Krona or whatever else, or Mentor, you may find you already actually have access to it. So it's always worth asking. So you might even have it without even having to pay anything extra.
Dead right, and it's a great point. They're often packaged in with the wider things. And the point I picked up is it's really important to communicate the benefits we've got. There's a lot of staff, a lot of employees who actually don't know what they've got. So it doesn't do any harm just to walk them through every now and again as to we offer this, that, the other. They may be pleasantly surprised. EAP is one that a lot they don't know about. And there's one or two other insurances, which again is the big ticket item, as we probably know, is medical cover, Bupa, Aviva, and all the rest of them. That's what a lot of staff are asking about, but they don't always know some of the other things that may be packaged up, as Nikki suggests. So communicate the benefits. In terms of what's happening this year, maybe all those things might be a bit difficult to sustain. I think there's quite a degree of restructuring going on in my experience and changing things around. And it's also suggested, this may or may not apply to us, to be honest, but that employers retain the initiative with the trade unions in terms of communicating well with their workforce, not letting the trade unions do it for them. And I think that's really important. So it comes back to communication again. Now we move to potential changes to employment law and what's on the horizon. I'm mainly addressing, I think, Conservatives and Labour, but other political parties are available. Perhaps we'll kick off with Labour first. In the past month or so, they've indicated their glide path as to what they want to do. It's heralded as the biggest levelling up of workers' rights in decades, and a new deal for working people. I'm completely neutral, by the way, on all this. I don't advocate or whatever for any of the parties. I just reflect what's being said out there on open forum. So what Labour are seeking to introduce is introduce a day one right to unfair dismissal protection. As you'd be aware, it's currently 2 years. And that's potentially even before you take on somebody. So they could be protected by employment law. They propose to remove the limits on unfair dismissal compensation. At the minute, it's 105,707 pounds, but they propose to take off those limits. Again, we'd be aware, I think, in discrimination cases, it could be more than that. Not often, but it could be. Then there's also extending the right not to be unfairly dismissed to all workers, not just employees in the employee sense, but gig economy people and all sorts of people who lie at the minute outside what we consider to be employees. So employment rights for them. Then if employees do wish to bring a claim in an employment tribunal, the limit at the minute is currently 3 months. After their last day of employment, they've got to bring their claim within 3 months. Labour would propose to extend that. I'm not sure to what. I'm guessing maybe 6 months, but there's tunes to that. And also, they would seek to enhance trade union membership and the role of collective bargaining, which is particularly in the public sector as well.
Sorry, Tim, you were saying about the extending 3 months to 6 months of what the time after they've left to be able to claim?
Correct. Yeah.
Why are they suggesting that?
It's not entirely clear to me, but 3 months can go very quickly. In fact, with my assistant vice hat on, I talked to somebody on Monday who actually left his company without realising it towards the end of July. And as I was talking to him this month, he's already 2 months into it. So my advice, frankly, was to get a move on, talk to ACAS, which I think is an excellent organisation for these things. But he'd only have a month to put in his claim. And they're quite strict on tribunals. If you miss your 3 month deadline, they're likely to gong you out.
Yes.
So there's that. Potential consequence of Labour policy. I think it may impact on probationary periods. I personally always advocate probationary periods, both the employer and the employee, actually. It gives the chance for both parties to look at each other and see if it's going to work out. But I think it could well end, because if you get employment rights from the word go, what's the point to a certain extent? I think, and Nick and I had 1 or 2 conversations about this in the past, be a bit more cautious, employers, when recruiting, and greater due diligence on applicants. And finally, I would strongly advocate, before any of this may come in, tackle any performance issues that you may have at the minute with employees. Better to do it now and run through your processes than leave it, and it tends not to get better, in my experience. So I think now's a good opportunity, should there be a change in government, for sorting those sort of things out. My summary from the Labour policy is, if these changes, if they're implemented, they require a lot of employers to change their approach to recruitment and performance management and to dismissal. Conservative Party, well, we've sort of seen this in action. This chap's really has a lot on its hands just now. I mean, the news this week, there's strikes in all sorts of sectors, and they continue. What the Conservatives had tried to introduce, but in fact they have now, because it's had royal assent, is strikes, open brackets, minimum service levels, close brackets, Act 2023. It became law on the 20th of July. and they title this as a bill to make provision about minimum service levels in connection with the taking by trade unions of strike action related to certain services. The jury's out on quite how effective this could be in reality, but I guess they're looking at the blue light services and also doctors and medical staff for that one, and firefighters, etc., etc. So that's where they're going for in that act. We'll see how that actually works. Then you may remember last year there's a lot of noise about P&O ferries. The Conservatives said P&O ferries deliberately sought to evade the law by sacking 786 seafarers without due consultation in 2022. And therefore, it's fire and rehire. And in essence, this is all about changing terms and conditions, but with meaningful consultation, which clearly P&O didn't do. I don't think that can be diced up in any other way. So they launched a 12-week consultation earlier this year, and a code has emerged. This code does not make the practice of fire and hire unlawful, but it does include practical steps for us employers that we should follow, which almost inevitably is consultation, planning, which I think is so important. A lot of these things, plan them. And so my advice again would be plan ahead. If you can see you want to change your terms and conditions or potentially may want to restructure, plan ahead, consult with the workforce, affect it properly, communicate properly, and follow your own processes. Again, we as employers, if we don't follow our own processes, our own procedures, if and when we get to an employment tribunal, which I'd hate any of us to get to be perfectly honest, I think it's quite a lottery, we'd be considered automatically unfair if we've not followed our processes. So that's really the importance of that. And in terms of employment tribunals, just as an aside, they've got more than 50,000 cases stacked up, outstanding, and the delay for people to get there is 2 to 3 years to hear cases, which is a long time. It's really stressful for employers. It's really stressful for employees. A lot of time, effort, and money. And as I say, I hope it's not too controversial, but I think it's a bit of a lottery as to you can't guarantee any outcome. So I'd prefer my clients and us not to go to tribunals. There's ways and means of dealing with it. And one of them is to follow processes and procedures. So that's that. And again, employer assistance program comes into that general landscape for me. It is really useful. It's relatively low cost and all parties benefit. So if you've not got one or you discover that it's not part of a package you've got, then it's worth looking at. Then we get, well, that was the hard and fired scenario. This is one that the Conservatives were very keen on early in the year. I think it's gone backwards. It's called the Retained EU brackets Revocation and Reform close brackets Act 2023. It has had royal assent again in late June. What it meant is that sunsetting, as they call it, thousands of EU laws, not just employment ones, but all sorts of laws that were due to expire automatically at the end of this year, 2023, unless they've already been reviewed, amended, or renewed. Well, most of them haven't, to be honest. So I think the sunsetting bit is probably out the window now, though you can see their glide path as to what they want to do. Practical examples in my world, anyway, of what could be relitigated include what counts as working time, working regulations, which are far from clear sometimes, how to count the numbers of redundancies for collective redundancy purposes, what happens to employees when a service is to be transferred to multiple new providers. That's always a bit of a grey area, but they'll want to scrap that. And what should be included in holiday pay and when unused holidays can be carried forward, which is always a real, it ain't great for employers, to be honest. It's again, grey areas that. That's all EU legislation, which they'd like to sunset and start off with something a bit different, I think. I'll leave you to ponder as to whether these will actually be enacted before the upcoming general election, which they believe will be next year. I really don't know, but that's certainly where they want to go. Then just to finish up, really, by the way, I quite like the photo of the bonfire that summed up that one. A general conclusion, holiday pay for part-time workers has been quite a bone of contention since a case law last year. It's called Harper Trust versus Brazil, and it's complicated matters. And it involves entitlement to holiday pay under working time regulations, and for part-time workers, they could actually be paid the same as full-time workers. So it's a bit controversial, and I think that's still being waded through as to the real implications, but it's throwing the calculations a lot of employers were doing last year up in the air a bit. It could mean unlawful deductions for earnings, which could take to a tribunal, but we'll see on that one. Then again, you may have picked up listening to the news this week. Long-term sickness absence is running at record levels, and the government has actually launched a funding competition to boost occupational health amongst SME employees. So that's good, but haven't seen a great deal of it at the minute. But that could involve occupational health assessments and all sorts of things, which I think is probably a good thing, but there will be a cost to it. Doctor's notes has come into focus. GPs are being asked to issue fewer sickness notes under fresh government plans to boost the British economy. And there's been a spike of the number of people outside employment after the pandemic, which hasn't really come down. And the idea is to support them to remain at work. Then there's another sort of controversial one. It's certainly not law at the minute, but advertising salaries. It's been trialled in New York, of all places, that all adverts have to have the salary on it. And it's mixed over here, but you'll have your own views as to whether that's good, bad, and different. The idea is to close the wage gap. That's the general concept there. National insurance records, I won't go on with this one, but it may be worth us checking through gov.uk our national insurance contributions over the years, because it all feeds into statutory pension when that comes up. And if there's gaps, you do stand the chance of being able to backfill it. So it might be a good thing. And finally, we can expect...
Sorry, on the national insurance, I helped a client with that the other day. So I set up her gateway accounts. It's a separate gateway account for national insurance. It took about 5 to 10 minutes. You have to have certain identification with you to be able to log into it, but then it's all there. It's straightforward so that you can see. And then if you do see any things that on there that's incorrect, you just go back to the department to prove that you did work or didn't work, whatever, if any of the gaps are incorrect.
Absolutely, and it's an important thing to check. And one of the identifications, as you know, Nikki, is national insurance number. So if you do go onto gov.uk, have your national insurance number with you, and maybe get one or two other things, but it's a really useful thing.
It's amazing. I've had people have duplicate national insurance numbers from other people and things, and so people's records have got mixed. There's so it's really important to have a look in case your NI number's been taken over by somebody else.
Quite. And the final bit is that April 2024, we can expect increases to maternity pay, paternity, adoption leave, shared paternal leave, and sick pay, which normally go up once a year, and that's the time. And thank you for your time. That's it. A lot to go through. I'm sorry if I've gone a little bit quick, but it's more a question of whittling it down a bit. Happy to take any questions with Nikki if you got them.
Absolutely. No, that was really good. There's so much, there's so much in the arena of HR. I always think about, there's so much to think about different taxes and things, but HR, it's a whole myriad of legislation to keep up to date with, in case law and all sorts of different issues. So there's always something. So we are very happy taking questions. Obviously, there might be something that is a bit more confidential that you want to talk about, so please do feel free to contact Tim directly on LinkedIn if you want to ask more of a confidential question or get his advice. But yeah, we've already had some good feedback from Nigel. Thank you very much. Paying attention, excellent. But yeah, if there's any questions that anyone's got, anything about unfair dismissal, constructive dismissal, probation, fair wages, whatever it might be. We're happy to take any question at this moment. Or settlement agreements, all the different things, disciplinaries, grievances, anything like that. But that was really, really full of lot of information. So one thing that you went through, Tim, that I was thinking at the time I was going to ask a question on. So I'll while I've got the opportunity, I will. So you mentioned about the P&O case. That there was a lot of shouting about it at the time, but as I understand, nothing really happened afterwards. Is that right?
I think effectively P&O paid out most employees to a settlement agreement or something and made the cases go away. But in pure employment law terms, they didn't consult, they didn't do anything right, to be perfectly honest, but they paid their way to get out of it, which is not a good one. And secondly, and I think most of us have related to this, their reputation is shot to bits after something
Oh,
like that.
absolutely.
And I don't know how it's impacted on them this year, but it's a dreadful thing to go into headlines, and I wouldn't have thought any employer would want that to happen. So that's a corollary of it. And latterly, even the Conservatives are thinking of changing the law to stop that happening in the future. So that's the sort of outcome of that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you mentioned as well about the level of strikes and everything. So, still ongoing is the doctors, etc., still got their ongoing wage disputes. Do you think there's any likelihood or weakening, or do you think this government's just going to let it lie for the next government to sort out?
They must be tempted. Again, I don't wish to sound political. They're quite entrenched, aren't they, to two positions, both the
I
government.
think, very entrenched, and I do think a lot of them are just more concerned about doing their interviews for their next jobs.
Yeah. Yes. And the fact this has been going on all year, in fact, more than a year, indicates there's going to be no quick settlement. A few have settled, I think. One or two of the rail unions have settled.
Yes.
But there's a lot still going on.
Absolutely. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Tim. So we will have our next business broadcast the 4th Wednesday of October. So it will be our Halloween broadcast. And our succession planning show will be the 2nd Wednesday. So please do look out for them. We're also doing a special Zoom webinar for it's actually a business broadcast one, a special one for regarding the particular intricacies of accounting for engineering firms. So we're going sector specific. That's on 4th of October. 4th of October. That's next week. It's flying by. So that's on Zoom though. So that's the sign in is a bit different. So please just do just put down engineering in the notes, and I will add you on to the Zoom if you would like to be added to know a bit more about the intricacies of engineering accounting. But thank you so much, Tim. That was brilliant seminar this afternoon, and we've already had some great feedback in the comments. So thank you so much, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, everybody.